Hello! Welcome to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours, where we spend time well by spending it together. I'm Claire Martin.
Hello.
Hey!
It's Seven Day.
It's 7 Day. I'm so excited.
I can
Is this our
tell.
favorite day so far?
This is Claire's favorite day so far.
We're going to have to talk about why that is. I think there's probably a reason, a deep reason.
So many of my faves we get to talk about. Got a whole stack of books. I'm like Kelly today. I have a whole stack of books. I wore my party shirt and my party
this is where my 7 and your 7 would be different, because my 7 would not consider books at all on 7 Day.
I'm not saying I'm acting like a 7. I'm saying I'm ready to talk about my 7s, and I have a bunch of books that will give me evidence in which to do so.
Fair enough. All the 7s out there, we're going to need you to call in, give us a playlist.
Yes.
They'll watch for exactly 5 minutes, and then they're going to be off doing the next thing.
Fine.
So,
They have better things to do.
join us for as long as you can.
The party is already planned.
That's right. Right.
I've been very worried about 7s over the last 3 months, because
Yeah.
7s are hurting.
I thought about that too. Yeah. Reach out to them. They're not okay.
That's
Yeah.
true.
5s are loving it. We're good. But 7s are not okay.
Yeah. Sevens are even more susceptible to COVID, or at least to COVID-induced depression.
I think they're both more susceptible to COVID, because they're probably the ones with their hands all over everywhere.
They're probably out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
They can't not have the party. They're the
Kellie,
COVID party people.
Kelly, we love your description so much, but I feel like this of all days, it's going to be good to do a really succinct intro,
Got you.
and then Jeremy and I can dive in with characters, and we can just feather in the details.
Y'all bring me in when you need me. Yeah.
Perfect.
So
yeah.
I'm going to give you a couple of high level words, and then y'all, if you guys get to a point where you need a little clarification, I'll jump back in. So 7s, there are enthusiasts. They're also called the epicure or the generalist. The main things to know here, they're still in the head triad. They're at the very edge there, along with 6 and 5. So they're still in the thinking center. Everything that they process, understand, perceive comes through their head first. We were just talking earlier, sometimes they can be confused with a heart center or feelings triad, because they are so winsome and fun and kind of light. Yeah. So, but they do still process everything through their head. They still have that kind of anchor emotion of fear and are oriented around security. And the way in which they pursue that is by planning the next adventure. What's the next thing? So their basic fear is of being, their basic desire is of being happy, satisfied, fulfilled. And their basic fear is of then being deprived or trapped in pain. So these are folks that are going to flee from hard stuff. It takes a lot of emotional development and maturity to be able to kind of be okay in a moment, especially in a tough moment. So remember, we talked about 4s. 4s are often kind of viewed as polar opposite to 7. So the 4 is fine with those moments. The 7 is I gotta go.
This is where we have to talk more, because I'm not fine with those moments.
I'm
not.
It's an interesting. There's not a lot of
connection. But I experience them a lot.
But see, it's so interesting, because this doesn't mean you're not a 7, but you don't present as a 7.
No, I don't. I know.
At all.
Until it's time to throw a party at a play.
The first time that I met you, which was the day that we did drinks before our panel at Blackfriars, I was convinced that you hated me. I was like, man, he's so mad. He's so mad that he invited me.
He comes off like that.
She's so young and amateur. Yeah. I was just projecting all of this insecurity onto you, because I didn't know if you I couldn't tell if you liked me, because you were so serious.
No, it's I being in public, and me there's major fear involved in that. I will say that.
And that doesn't strike me as very 7.
It doesn't. But I want to.
Remember, we can all have fun and party, just in different ways, right? The fixation for the 7, the thing that kind of mentally keeps them blocked, is planning. Again, they're always planning the next adventure. So that's how the thinking center kind of comes into play. It's like literally in the middle of the party they're throwing, they're already kind of planning the next one, right? Like in the middle of the vacation, they're already booking their next trip because they're like, this is going, well, and really what that boils down to is like, this will end and that makes me sad. So I got to plan the next thing so that I'm not sad because it ended.
That so resonates with me so much.
Okay, so the passion here, the struggle, the emotional struggle is gluttony, and that's just excess. It's not necessarily just overeating, but it's over everything, right? Just everything in abundance. In health, they are joyful, satisfied, enthusiastic, spontaneous, productive, realistic, and energizing. When they're not so healthy, they can be really scattered, distracted, flaky, self-centered, excessive, escapist, frenetic, manic, reckless, addictive. So one interesting thing, and then we'll let you guys jump in, about the 7 is they kind of suffer from this. Everyone kind of has their thing, right? The 1 has the internal critic, or the inner critic. The 6 has the internal committee. The 7 has what they call a monkey mind. Like it's always bouncing around. They can't just rein it in. There's always something else. And they have this like aversion to boredom, and they feel like any moment of stillness is not okay.
Yeah, so, I have that. That's in the soup.
Fun. Let's see. The 7-wing 6 is called the entertainer because they can bring in people, right? So they're able to pull into that 6 loyalist relationship wing. Yep, they're curious. They have a sense of humor. They're productive, playful, and they organize people. And then the 7 with an 8 wing, which is now reaching into the body triad, they're called the realist. So they're material, determined in their pursuits. They're really good at multitasking, and they could also kind of boundary into that workaholism sort of space because they're using the intensity of the 8 to pursue their interests and their plans.
I know someone a little like that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the overview. We can get into all the other things as we go through. Y'all just pull me in when you want. We can talk about growth and stress. There's a connection to the type 1 in stress. So 7s go to 1 when they're stressed out, and they can go to 5 when they're healthy and in their kind of growth point. So we can get into that as you guys want. So
amazing.
All right.
So Jeremy, like this is not like before we jump into Shakespeare characters, like there's a reason in particular why this is all making me sort of giddy today. I've spent a lot of time in the past 3 months with the characters from Tolstoy's War and Peace, and I've been trying to figure out how to get them into like stage adaptation form. And I have a theory that the 2 Rostov siblings are both 7s. One of them is a 7-6, and the other one is a 7-wing 8. But they are like, I think the reason why that family is absolutely like just verve and joy is because they are like true Epicureans and they're siblings, and so they bounce off each other and they have like a repartee back and forth. And what I'm excited to talk about today, there is a segue, I promise. What I'm excited to talk about today is the plays that Shakespeare writes where there are a couple of 7s who banter. Because I think that is some of Shakespeare's most fun language and most fun scenes. So just like it was the most fun to write for Nikolai and Natasha in War and Peace, I think that I'm just really excited to talk about Shakespeare's 7 pairings, romantic or not, that he like throws together, because I think that is where some of the most like exciting, scintillating literary magic kind of happens. So who do you have?
I want to start with 2 very, very little known characters, but they have great names, and I think their names tell us that they're 7s. Are you ready?
Is it Mopsa and Dorcas? It's
not.
Oh.
These characters are from Henry VI Part 2 and Henry VIII, respectively. Are you ready? You're sitting down?
Yep.
You're going to walk off the screen when I say them. George Beavis and Dr. Butts. What?
I love that.
That's so interesting. I had Margaret Jourdain, so I had the other one.
No. I just picked them literally because of their names, Beavis and Butts.
You're pulling into your 7 to pick the actual one. That's great.
You can't say a character is a type because their name is funny.
I mean, I can and would.
I think you just did. That's awesome.
To be fair, Dr. Butts is one of the only redeeming parts of Henry VIII. It's like him and Catherine of Aragon. That's what you go for.
I once played a different doctor with a funny name, Dr. Pinch, who's not a 7.
Not a 7.
But I think funny names are great. So Beavis and Butts, you're welcome, 7s. So I just got a lot of different ones. I have these are in no particular order. I wrote them down like a 7 would.
Great.
So Simonides and Pericles is a 7.
Yep. I have him.
110%. He throws a big party. It's a big knights tournament, all of that. Great. Mardian in Antony and Cleopatra, who's
Same.
like he's there for the party. He's like an attendant, but he's a really great, like, tiny little character. I wonder about Audrey and As You Like It. I think she might be a 7, but we don't get to see it much. She's very excited about a wedding. Hymen in that play is a 7.
Sure.
Well, and I wrote that down like a 7. Now can't read it anymore. Falstaff, which we'll get to. I wonder about the French ones responsible for sending the tennis balls to Henry V. Could be 7s.
The Dauphin?
Yeah, the Dauphin.
The Dauphin is not a 7.
But like,
not 7.
I'm like, but like the idea is 7-ish. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Oh no,
Yeah.
Totally. It's
And that's why I
it's
say
7.
the ones responsible, because like it's got a quirk to it that I like.
It's the Dauphin mocking Hal's 7-ness, but the Dauphin is not a 7.
Okay. I think the host in Merry Wives of Windsor could be a 7.
Yep.
Certainly
Same.
put into 7 circumstances. Pompey in Measure for Measure.
Yep.
And actually probably Pompey and Antony and Cleopatra.
Antony and Cleopatra, yeah.
So Mercutio.
Yes.
We talked about Ariel the other day, and as I've learned more about the 7, I think Ariel's right, and so are the goddesses in that. In the play within a play. There are several characters at the top of Julius Caesar, which starts with a party. It's the whole thing is a party. And then the tribunes come in and say, stop doing that, shoemaker. It's not a shoemaker. It is a shoemaker, and somebody else is somebody else.
Cobbler.
But there are 2 or 3 of them, and it's the whole thing starts with a party. So anyway, there are some minor characters at the top of that play. I once got yelled at by an English professor who did not like that there was a party at the top of that play and thought I wasn't taking the play seriously enough as a tragedy. And
people like that exhaust me.
And it was, I'm like, did you read it? It's a party.
But also, like, oh God. Like,
anyway.
What?
I think. I think so. I've got those. In the Scottish play, I have Duncan as a 7.
Yeah.
He's going to the Mac's house to have a party. He's making a big deal of honoring, like he's just like giving out awards all over the top of that play.
Yeah.
I
have this theory that actually Duncan is super insecure in that play. That he feels like he needs to buy his friends, like even his son's loyalty. He's like, here, you can be the Prince of Cumberland. Love me, son.
And to the extent that play is Scottish, and I have real questions about whether it is or not, but like those people, they get it. They get the party. They do.
And I can, as someone who's been to Inverness, I can confirm they get down in Inverness, which is where the Mackers live.
I also think the witches and Hecate are 7s in that play, all of them.
Yep, all of them, all 4.
I think Timon in Timon of Athens is a 7. Which is sad because that play does not end well for him. But he's throwing a party the whole time, and he definitely hits the epicure note.
Yeah.
I have questions beside Titus, who's got lots of things going on, but he certainly kind of goes wild like a 7 at times. So he may be more like an 8-wing 7 or something like that. But I mean, like when he is separated from his reality late in that play, that's fun. Like when he's like filleting Chiron and Demetrius, and then when he does the baker stuff at the end of that play. I mean, let me just say I played Titus once and did the entire final scene sort of as the Swedish chef, and it worked. So I think there's a 7 there. And by the way, in case I didn't make it clear, Swedish chef 7. Okay. Who else have I got? I think we talked about Bottom the other day. I think Bottom could be a 7-wing 8 or an 8-wing 7. One of the two.
Interesting. Don't have him.
Barone.
Yeah. My boy.
And I have second. I want to say this says second clown, but I don't know what that. I don't know what that is. Maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe I will refresh myself.
You're gonna have to figure out who it is. I have no idea.
The other question mark I have. I know you mentioned him for an earlier number. Wonder about Sir Andrew.
No.
I just think he's goofy and weird and like.
I think he behaves goofy. I think he is pure heart. I think he's pure heart. I think he's all for.
Oh, I think he's pure. Yeah, sure.
I think like pure heart. I don't think this is a head center ultimately. There's nothing going on up there. I think Sir Toby Belch is a 7. I think Sir Toby Belch has
sure. I think with the dark stuff, yeah. The reason I think Andrew maybe is because I don't think he's good at head stuff at all. 0%. I think he's a total moron in a good way. But like, he's processing things up there. That's, I think.
Yeah, we can talk more about that. I don't,
you know, he gets everything wrong, but he's working.
I think he's a socially anxious 4. So he puts on an affectation of like giddiness and jubilee because that's what makes Toby like him, and he wants to be loved. He like craves that like companionship and love. So he like puts on the performance that will make Toby love him. But I think he is driven by motivations that are all 4.
Interesting. I sort of think of him as an epicure. Not one I hate. I don't hate him.
No.
I think he's wrong, but I think on the weekends he eats charcuterie. Do you know what I mean?
Well, no, he can be poncy, but I still think he's a 4.
Okay.
Is that your list?
Those of you who want to referee this debate, you just post in the comments and we'll go with the winner.
I mean, I'm right, so choose wisely.
Remember, there's a sunny 4. Like there's the self-preservation 4 is a little bit more lighthearted than the classic sort of presenting 4, so that could be part of it.
I think he's the self-preservation 4.
Tell us about the subtypes of 7.
Yep. So we've got, remember the subtypes are your instinctual variants, and it's kind of how you default to dealing with your emotional pattern or passion of, for the 7, it's gluttony. So the self-preservation subtype of 7 is called keepers of the castle. They create close networks of family, friends, and colleagues to keep themselves feeling stimulated and secure, but also generating new and interesting ideas and opportunities. The social subtype is called sacrifice. So sacrifice simulation momentarily in service of the group or an important ideal by postponing their gratification, but they still want recognition for their sacrifice so that they can get what they want later. And this can be confused with a type 2. And then the 1-to-1 or sexual subtype of the 7 is called suggestibility or fascination. So they need to see the stark reality of the world through rose-colored glasses so that this embellished reality helps them live in a dreamlike state. They have highly idealized view of intimate relationships that rarely live up to this ideal.
All right. That's helpful.
Isn't it?
I like that. Well, I certainly understand the 2 connection. They just look like
So
manipulators.
the counter type is the social. And again, that has to do with the fact that they're giving when their core sort of passion is gluttony, which is usually intake. So that one can be the one that hangs people up as far as like it doesn't look like a 7 ought to look, or maybe doesn't fit the classical definition.
It's like they're giving to get, right?
Totally, for appreciation.
Yeah.
So that's why it looks like the 2.
Notice
but again,
how great I am.
Right. And how fun I am and how much fun I'm giving you and the party that I planned for you. Isn't it
God,
amazing?
I feel so personally attacked right now, but I'm excited to talk about the characters I have because they share this with me. Oh yes, for our listeners who haven't like pieced it together, I'm an 8-wing 7. So
I can't wait till 8 day. I just have to say.
Oh my God.
Oh, we gotta rest up for that one. Isn't that next week?
Hello! Are you a Patreon subscriber? If so, then this message is for you. Thank you so much for supporting Sweet Tea Shakespeare. As we gear up for another exciting season of shows, concerts, and events, we are issuing a challenge to boost our monthly Patreon sustainer giving. If you can up your pledge, even just a little bit, you will ensure that Sweet Tea Shakespeare can continue making delightful content all year round. You can also buy a season ticket that will grant you access to all of our Patreon content, along with reserved seats to every one of our performances. For more information, check out our website at sweetteashakespeare.com or find us on Patreon at patreon.com/sweetteashakes.
All right, Claire, who do you have?
Okay, unlike you, I did not write these in a 7 order. Or I mean, yeah, I went alphabetically through the comedies, histories, tragedies like I've been doing all along. So from All's Well That Ends Well, I have Paroles and the Clown, very different kinds of 7s. Yep.
We need to talk about Paroles, but keep going for now.
Okay. From As You Like It, I do have Audrey, and I also have Phoebe. I think Phoebe's a 7.
Okay.
Yep. Because the Phoebe that we see in the few moments before she meets Ganymede, she's not like, I need love, I need affection from one place, I need she's a pretty like she's got a lot of self-esteem, she's got like kind of like verve and she clearly has her own agenda, she's on her own like path, and her language is it's fun, it's sparkling. I think she's a 7. From Comedy of Errors, Antipholus of Ephesus. He's the partying husband that Adriana's like, where is he? Well, he's getting drunk and hooking up with a courtesan. From Cymbeline, I think Iachimo is a really dark 7. I think that fundamentally Iachimo is bored out of his mind like all the time. So he has these really terrible, fun things that he goes and does to like distract himself from the existential void. In Love's Labor's Lost, first of all, Costard. I think Costard's a 7.
I want to talk about him in Paroles. We're going to come back.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. But where my heart is with Love's Labors, which is, everyone knows, it's my favorite play. Barone and Rosaline are both 7s. They're very different kinds of 7s. She's a 7-wing 8, and he's either pure 7 or 7-wing 6, but they are both 7s. Continuing my theory that all of the couples in Love's Labors are the same type, and that is why they're drawn to each other, and that's why they drive each other crazy.
We're going to talk about that someday on our deep dive.
You want to talk about what?
I want to talk about that someday on our deep dive of Love Labor's Lost.
Yep.
I have trouble seeing any of those people as people. So we could talk like after Princess,
What?
and after Rosaline. I can get the first 2, and I can get Barone, but I can't even get really Ferdinand. Just a little bit. But the other 4, I'm just like, what? This is like a wall of sameness.
No. Oh my God, no. I'm going to come armed to the teeth for that deep dive.
That's fine. I'm looking for the help. It's not an attack.
These are my children. These are my kids.
You're
not
like
coming
a 5.
after them.
A 6.
from
What is
Measure
that?
for
5.
Measure,
You sound like a 5.
I have Pompey from Measure for Measure. From Merchant of Venice, I think the Prince of Aragon is a 7. Merry Wives, I also have the host. Midsummer Night's Dream. Don't have Bottom. I think we should talk about Bottom. I had Puck and Snout from Midsummer.
Mm-hmm. I like Puck there.
I think Puck's pretty damn 7. I mean, I don't know what Puck would be if he's not 7. From Much Ado, I have Margaret and Benedict. I think Benedict is classic 7-wing 6. From Pericles, I have, how do you say it? Simonides? Simonides.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Simonides.
I think the bod from Pericles. From Taming of the Shrew, Christopher Sly, I think is a 7.
Mm-hmm.
From The Tempest, Stefano, I think is a 7. From Troilus and Cressida, Thersites, who's the wee bastard. From Twelfth Night, Sir Toby Belch. From Two Gentlemen of Verona, I have Launce. From The Winter's Tale, I think Mopsa and Dorcas, the shepherdesses, are classic 7s. And I'm really sad that we don't see more of them because I love the idea of Mopsa, Dorcas, and Perdita having a kind of similar vibe to the princess and her ladies in LLL. From the Henriad, all right, here we go. From Richard II, a very obscure character that I happen to love, Fitzwater. He shows up in one scene. It's the gauge throwing scene, which is the best scene in that play. Fitzwater is like a tiny honey badger, and you don't know anything about him except he's like 19 and wants to fight everyone, but he has like true like Epicurean 7 wild chaotic energy. Have Falstaff, obviously we're going to talk about him. The Douglas, I think the Douglas from Henry IV Part 1 is a 7. I also think Rumour from Henry IV Part 2 is a 7, and I think Catherine of Valois from Henry V, the way she's portrayed in that play, I think is a 7. And I've spent a lot of time with her because I'm writing a companion play to Henry V, so I am with Catherine a lot. From the Wars of the Roses, I only had Jourdain, but I think you're right with the other guy, even though you only picked him because of his name. I think they're both 7s. I didn't have anyone from King John. King John was one of the few plays that I couldn't think of anyone who's a 7 from King John, unless King John is, but he's just moody all the time, so I don't know. From Henry VIII, I also had the Doctor, and I also had the old lady, the one who's like, man, I would like kill the queen if that meant I could be queen. She's a lot of fun. From the tragedies, I have Mardian, I have Pompey. I also think Mark Antony in that play. I think he's like, I mean, the real Mark Antony was an Epicurean, but I think in that play he is like, he brings the party everywhere he goes, every scene, like to the point of like not really having a sense of like human responsibility, right? Or like leadership.
I don't think you're wrong. I just can't decide if the play is about 7s versus 1s. And so it's like a 7 circumstance versus a 1 circumstance. And like obviously he's chosen the 7 life at the beginning of that play, but it does torment him. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, I don't think that there's anything that says that 7s can't have a guilt complex about wasting their life or wasting their time, because Falstaff certainly does, but he is a 7.
Yeah.
Something to talk about. From Coriolanus, I mean, Coriolanus is such a hard play. No one seems ever to be having fun in that play. And that's why I think it's so depressing to watch. There's just like no one ever seems to get joy as a character. But maybe Ophidius is a 7. I want to like move away from the idea that 7s have to just be partiers, because I think they can also, I think some of their like manic extroverted energy can manifest in violence. That's where I get like Fitzwater, and I think Ophidius might also be a 7. From Hamlet, this might be controversial, but I've played her, so I want to say I think Ophelia might be a 7. Especially because I looked at the breakdown of like high 7s versus low 7s, like when 7s are in a bad place, and that pretty much to me reads the way she comes across in Act 4. From Julius Caesar, I have Cinna the poet, I think is a 7. Nobody from King Lear, except maybe the Fool. But the Fool does not seem to be having any fun in that play. I mean, the Fool is like along for the ride and possibly is loyal to Lear, but like even the Fool is pretty embittered, I suppose. Pretty disillusioned. From McMackers, I had the Witches and Hecate. From Othello, I have a question about maybe Emilia as a 7 who's been abused, like emotionally abused into performing another type. You know what I mean? Like, is she a 7 deep down, but because of the marriage that she's in, she has been like beaten down into something else? I don't know. I just like, it's one I want to talk about because I think that we get flashes when I'm like, oh, that sounds like a spirit we don't usually see, or that's there's a lightheartedness in there that like is not immediately apparent with her. So I don't know. Maybe she's a 7. From Romeo and Juliet, my babe Mercutio. From Timon of Athens, I not only had Timon, but I had literally every single character in scene 1. Like everyone at that party, they all are just pure 7s. And then from Titus Andronicus, I don't know about Titus. I don't know the play well enough, probably, but I think Demetrius might be a 7. I'll defer to you on that one, Jeremy, because you have played the part, and I've never.
Chiron and Demetrius both have that sort of manic quality
Yeah,
to them.
yeah.
They're another set of characters where I'm like, is there a difference between those two, or did we just need to have a part for actor number 12? Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And but I think they both could be, and I think we've said them for something else too. I can't like the emo. Well, they have the emo. One of them at least has the emo sort of.
I had Chiron. Yeah, I had Chiron as a 4 because Chiron strikes me as more emo. I had Demetrius as a 7.
There's some of the extreme, and you guys have already kind of hit on this. Some of the extreme, like lower levels of health for a 7 include things like mania, depression, wild mood swings, panic, paralyzing terror.
Stop talking. It sounds too
much. OCD. This is like the warning box, like get help now. Yeah. So this isn't like an everyday, but a lot of your characters are probably experiencing some of these arcs. So, it's like extreme dissipation and attempts to escape anxiety, long-standing and debilitating addictions, impulsiveness, offensiveness, infantile reactions, and then highly elevated mood swings. So it's a thing. Yeah.
Sounds like a disorder I'm familiar with. Okay, so we need to talk about Falstaff. And we could talk about Costard and Paroles, but I see, and I'm not saying, actually some of the stuff that Kellie just shared with us helps. I just see them as so sardonic and sort of like performing the lack of energy. I don't know if that makes sense, but they're like, they're like trying to be dry because they're so over their jobs. Like originally their jobs were like to be clowns, but they've sort of sailed through it. They're like the William Shatner of clowns. and that's why I have like, oh, they're a clown. They should be like, huh. And the hiding in the dark stuff and the sharp stuff helps me. Some of what Kellie just said.
It's interesting you say it because I've just seen so many Costards played so earnestly that it isn't a performance, that darkness isn't there. Paroles we should chat about. You probably know the character better than I do. I'm not well versed in All's Well. I know Helena pretty well, but that's about it. But I do I think Costard can be played as a 7 because I feel like I've seen it convincingly done many times where that lethargy is just not present. He genuinely is like as he is wide-eyed, and the commentary that he makes is meant to make us giggle. It's meant to make us laugh. But it's not. There isn't judgment attached to it so much.
Maybe it's just the actors I've seen. I don't know.
Maybe. That's possible.
I remember my note is actually, it does say second clown, and that is because I think the second clown in Hamlet is a 7.
Sure.
The Gravedigger.
I forgot that they're called clowns. All right. I buy that. Yeah, Paroles is like, so I've seen All's Well only twice. And then I've seen a couple like taped productions. I've read it a bunch of times, but I don't feel like I know it that well. You might have encountered it more.
I fell asleep at a production of All's Well That Ends Well at the National Theater.
Was that the one that Michelle Terry was in?
I believe so, yes.
The one that was like 3 hours long?
And it was set as a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And it was nope.
Not a 7.
It was a nope. It was a nope.
I mean, she's brilliant, but yeah, the trailer
but from 150 feet away in the dark, with sort of a mixed concept, I could have done without. I'm just saying. Sorry, Michelle, if you're out there. No we love Michelle in this house. I love her. She's lovely, but yeah, I like the trailer for that did not like suck me in. So we need to talk about Falstaff, I guess. And
well, I mean, do you have anything to say about Paroles? Like, this is the thing. I feel like I just don't know the character well enough. Maybe you have insight that I don't have.
The production that is in my head most frequently is a production where Paroles was this sarcastic, sardonic, low energy. But you could tell that the character wasn't low energy. He was just over the shtick. So it was all like dry delivery the whole time, and it was funny as hell. But it was like playing the opposite sort of what you'd expect. And you saw the kid, and it was a great like turn of the actor choosing the to play the character this way, but the character also felt like I don't know, it was like a clown on a cigarette break was the vibe for the whole time. But it was so fantastic. Have you ever seen what's the movie? It's Randy Rainbow, is that what it's called? Not Randy Rainbow. It's not Randy Rainbow. It's the guy that sings the Broadway tunes.
Oh, he's internet. For sure seven.
It's the movie with Edward Norton Jr. and Robin Williams where Robin Williams plays like a Mr. Rogers, Captain Kangaroo type character. But they have this. But the whole movie is about their off-screen life is like awful people and drug dealers, and that was like this. Anyway, that is imprinted on my brain as Paroles. So sorry for that digression.
I mean, I'm willing to concede Paroles. I would argue if Costard is not a 7, he can be played as a 7, and it works. Like it can work for a production to have a Costard as a 7, because I've seen it.
Great.
Yeah,
I'm on board.
It's the
Death to Smoochie.
The best production.
Death to Smoochie. Thank you in the comments too. We got that.
Oh, good.
Death to Smoochie. I don't know how I forgot that.
It's
fantastic.
The best production of LLL I ever saw and probably will ever see, which was in 2018 at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. Amanda Danart directed it, and Costard was played by Cedric Lamar, just like wide-eyed, earnest, open-hearted, like beauty. Like every time Costard was on stage, we all got like tingly inside. We rooted so hard for that like ridiculous character. And he played it with pure sprightly 7 energy. There was a bit of puckishness to it, but it was all rooted in like a genuine desire to like have fun, to make connections, to bring people together, to make life a party. Even though he was a servant, even though he had low status, it was like, how can I have the most fun with these people in this place? And it worked.
I like that.
Yeah. So Cedric, if you're watching this, you won't be. I loved your performance. Yeah, let's talk about Falstaff.
Falstaff likes to drink. He likes to make jokes.
Yep.
He lives basically in a bar.
Yeah.
He is a wit cracker. Harold Bloom thinks he's the greatest literary invention.
Do we have to invoke Harold Bloom now? Does that
but
have to happen?
I'm playing something right now, Claire. I need you to help me.
Just go with it.
Falstaff. Falstaff always has something to say.
like 12 things. Like he always has like 12 things to say.
He strikes me interestingly. I'll come out of it because the joke is over. But
sorry. I didn't help you at all. I'm sorry.
Interestingly enough, so thinking about that character 3-dimensionally is really interesting to me because he strikes me as a character.
I would say that's the only way to think about him.
I think he is 3-dimensional. I think the argument that Harold Bloom makes is actually probably right. But Harold Bloom can go do something with himself.
Yeah.
Thank
you for that.
But like as a character who is a sort of war veteran type figure and processing things like PTSD and things like that, and then coming back and like drinking himself into oblivion and like presenting that everything is fine, but really everything is not fine. It's major like performance or entertainment out there to hide what's going on the inside. And what's the core word? The core you were saying it's not fear, it was something else.
Well, the thing they're trying to avoid constantly is of being deprived or trapped in pain.
That's Falstaff.
Yeah.
He cannot be deprived and he cannot be in pain, like as a fundamental component of his personality. He can't do it.
Or like being dissociated too is another thing. So when a 1 goes, or when a 7 goes to 1 in stress, like in a really bad move, which I'm hearing a little bit of this, they have a hard time with limits anyway. So that's part of the boundary pushing for them. It's less about control. It's more about like, oh, there's no such thing as limits for me, and I'm going to push past them if they even present themselves. But if they move to 1 in an unhealthy way or an automated way, they can become hypercritical, judgmental, arrogant. They can play the victim card a lot, and they're really demanding and super rigid.
So Claire's got examples, but the Falstaff example is that he is so overwhelmed that he fakes dying on a battlefield.
Yep. To escape. That's one way.
And then he's sort of like, he sort of presents as sort of like, yeah, I'm okay with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you love Sweet Tea Shakespeare? Do you believe in the mission of our company? Then you should consider becoming a volunteer with us. For more information, please email info@sweetteashakespeare.com. That's info@sweetteashakespeare.com.
You have examples, Claire. You should share
I
your
have
examples.
lots of things to say. I mean, I actually was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's in the Faustus cast. Her name's Emily, and she and I were chatting on Wednesday night about the Enneagrams and Shakespeare characters. And she was saying, she's like, I have a theory that a lot of men do not like the Enneagram because they want to say, like, I can't be typed. Well, you can't type me. I'm untypable. And she says that, like, she knows guys who, whenever she sort of describes the Enneagram and her fascination with it, they're always like, oh yeah, but but I can't be typed. I can't. You can't type me. I'm untypable. And he's like, and that rhetoric is like, it absolutely saturates the scholarship of the Henriade. Like, every male scholar I've ever read who has written about Falstaff has been like, you can't type him. You can't put him in a box. He's not one thing. He's many things. He's all of the things. He's a prism of things. And I'm like, that's it's not true. And it's also like, that's just that's not how anything works. Least of all Shakespeare's characters. We're not saying that there aren't a limitless number of ways to play a Shakespeare character. Some of them are probably truer to the text than others, but like, Falstaff he like exudes sevenness. Like, he sweats sevenness. I mean, he according to Hal, he sweats to death. Just because he's just moving, it like requires so much effort. But Falstaff is in the Henriade, of course. He's a father figure to Hal. In many ways, he is the antithesis to Henry IV in both behavior and in what he represents. He represents misrule. Whereas Henry IV represents the actual rule of England, and Falstaff represents Epicureanism and self-indulgence and gluttony. And Henry IV is kind of this like ascetic. We talked about him. He's a 1. He's profoundly rigid and like rule oriented, and it's all about doing things for the kingdom and like set your feelings aside. And Hal is caught in between these two extremely formative male figures in his life. He's actively avoiding one, and he's actively choosing to project onto another, and that's Falstaff. And so we've talked on this podcast before about how much of our behaviors, if not our motivations, are influenced by our parents, right? That there can be generational trends of that, just because your mom is a 5 doesn't mean you're a 5, but you may really recognize it, or you may resonate with certain elements of it because you were raised in a household where you had to perform certain things to satisfy a 5, right? So Hal is an 8, and we're going to talk about him. I'm going to unfortunately talk y'all's ear off about him tomorrow because he's my favorite character ever written ever. But Hal is an 8 with a 7 wing that has been like nurtured by Falstaff. Like Falstaff is in many ways the greatest or the most influential educator in Hal's life, because Falstaff teaches him how to well, I don't want to swear, Jeremy. You've made me aware of this now. I don't want to swear, but like Falstaff teaches Hal to like master wordplay and master the lexicon to the point that you can talk your way out of anything with clever rhetoric, which is something that Hal takes and then runs with to kind of scary places in Henry V. And Falstaff, not only teaches him this, sort of linguistic and syntactical dexterity, but also Falstaff, encourages Hal to let loose, right? To release the pressures that his one father is putting on his. Instead, indulge in the behaviors that feel good and freeing and, wild. And that ends up having a very sort of profound impact on how Hal sees the country that he's going to be ruling, his awareness of the people that are in it, and his awareness of how responsibility and leadership and humanity are in this really sort of, they have a really contentious relationship in reality. So Falstaff is like, he has to represent that lifestyle. He can't be untypeable. He can't, he has to embody one portion of humanity, because that is the portion that influences who Hal is and who he chooses to be. And so Falstaff is, I don't know, there hasn't been a single thing, Kelly, you've told us about a 7 that is not like 1,000% Falstaff. And I should have clarified this. I'm speaking of Falstaff from the Henriade. The Falstaff who shows up in Merry Wives is a very different character. He's kind of a poor man's Falstaff. He's not nearly as intelligent. His wordplay is pretty paltry. He's not as funny. He's kind of pathetic. He gets his ass handed to him. Sorry, Jeremy, by 2 middle-aged women. Like it's just different in that play. So I'm not really counting Merry Wives in what I'm talking about here. I'm really talking about how he explodes into the Henry IV plays, and somehow puts himself at the center of that story, even though he has nothing to do with the court life that dominated the story of Richard II. He is this like curveball that gets thrown in Henry IV Part 1 and just like, I don't know, changes everything. I would argue for the better, but changes everything. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe we should subtype him. That's kind of, because that's when I was hearing you talk about the 3 subtypes, Kelly, I was like, I don't know where I would place him. He's not the counter type. He's either the...
So there's Keeper of the Castle, which is the self-pres, and there's the sexual, which is suggestibility. Let me get back to... So remember, the self-pres people are going to be more concerned with like immediate sort of needs, like lower level needs, but things like food, water, air, right? Like self-preserving sort of things. That's going to be how they push their gluttony forward. Those are the things that they're going to be most gluttonous for, right? To acquire. So they're going to keep close networks to be able to keep themselves feeling stimulated and interested. And then the social is going to have a broader sort of net, right? Again, this is the one that's the counter type. So they're going to be more generous, benevolent, appearing, looking like a 2. And then the 1-to-1 is going to look for that intimate relationship that's going to like go off an adventure with them, right? So that's one kind of
I don't think Falstaff's interested in adventures. I think he's interested in opposite of adventures.
He's self-pres.
Yeah.
So the intimate, they're also more idealistic and maybe a bit more naive, because they're just kind of like,
both of those things are true about Falstaff. Mm-hmm. Despite him being a genius, he's naive.
Okay, can the self-preservation subtype have to do with not just immediate like Maslow's lower needs, but also can it have to do with like public image? Because Falstaff is all about preserving a public image that everyone kind of knows is bullshit, but he goes to great lengths to protect it. Does that have to do with the subtype, or is that intrinsic to sevenness in any way?
I don't know about the subtype because it's not so much it's not invoking other people when you're talking about self-pres for the most part. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not really dependent on an outside perception. It's more about like meeting an immediate need within a person. Image. So, all right. So the mistypes, I haven't touched on those yet. So 7s are likely to mistype themselves as either 2s, 4s, or 3s. So that could be maybe a bit of that coming in the 3. So also 3, 7, and 8 are all in this assertive sort of stance.
Yeah, that's him and Hal.
So they're going to move against people and seeking out their security. The conflict style for 7. So when faced with conflict, they're in the positive outlook group. So that's going to be shared with the 9 and the 2. So 7, 9, and 2. And the way that the 7 does that is by focusing on the positive like experiences that they've had, right? And kind of just staying fixated on that. Like the 2 would be more about a positive image, and the 9 would be more about like the positive influence of other people or the positive experiences they have with other people. But the 7 is all about like the moment, the experience, the thing. But those could be some ties that bring in other sort of type components. Folks are likely to mistype themselves as 7s if they are a 9, a 3, or a 2. So once again, I think we're still talking about this positive outlook connection, and then also that their future. So 3, 7, and 8, those assertive folks are also future oriented. So their orientation to time is also always looking ahead and forward. So those are some similarities there too.
Falstaff occasionally looks ahead and then scares himself and just tries to have even more fun in the present. Like he overcompensates for the fact that he's got this growing dread of what's to come. But he is obsessed with the future and like how he's going to die and how his story is going to come to an end. And when he knows that Henry IV has died and that Hal has been coronated, the future he envisions for himself precipitates the absolute psychological collapse that he endures at the end of Henry IV Part 2, because he sees a glorious future that is brighter and shining and more gold than anything he could have fathomed before he met Hal, and he sees it and he runs to it and he literally goes and interrupts the procession, and that's it is a moment of pure hamartia. Like he just aims for the target and just misses entirely because he this whole time has not recognized that Hal is not a 7. Hal can do 7. He has a 7 wing and he has 7 instincts, but he is an 8. And at the end of the day, he's his father's son. And it's just like that moment is absolutely devastating because we feel like we can see Falstaff's imagined future collapse right along with him. Like we feel like we can see the shimmery, beautiful city on a hill future just like crumble to bricks in real time with him. And it is, if a production does it right, it is absolutely devastating. And it will stay with you forever. I love these plays.
I just want to say something broadly about the Enneagram, because we're landing on it without ever saying it. It's really two things. One is Shakespeare's writing three-dimensional characters.
Yeah.
And that, not all the time. There are some duds. Yeah. But like as a general rule, when he writes a thing, there's a whole person there.
Yeah.
A whole invention. Do you know what I mean?
That's what enables us to do this.
Yeah. And the other piece of this is that all of these, Kelly, you can help us with this, but every one of these numbers so far, and I assume for 8 and 9 as well, are roles, as in the theatrical term. They're things you put on, not the the thing you actually are, but they're like the performance out front of the thing that you actually are.
Yeah.
And like even down to the little code names we have for each of them. It's like oh, you're that kind of actor, and you're that kind of actor, and if you're this and this, then you're that kind of actor.
Yeah. And the key is we don't know we're doing it, right? Like it's all something that we've just kind of adapted to over time, and they're coping mechanisms that our ego has constructed to protect us in some way, because at some point in our childhood we missed the messages, right? The messages coming in and misperceived or, whatever. So we decided then, okay, well, the way in order to get loved, to be loved or to meet my needs is to do this thing. So now you're playing off of the fact that your parents or caregivers had a different way of perceiving the world themselves. So it just kind of all builds. And you're right, it's a mask that a lot of us don't know we're wearing, or it's a veil, in front of our eyes that we see the world through. We think everyone else sees it the same way, but that's not true, right? So understanding that you have this kind of obstruction in your view is super helpful. And then I've been super impressed at how it seems easily. I mean, obviously you guys have a really deep knowledge of the characters, but it seems really consistent. Like, I'm fascinated by that, because these are fictional characters kind of pulled out of thin air, but they're still really consistent with the human experience in 9 different ways. So I just think that that's fascinating and really speaks to the credibility of this kind of overlay. Whether or not they were using it back then or some version of it. I mean, it definitely kind of existed as a model of sorts, not necessarily with modern psychology, infused into it. But yeah, I think it's fantastic. And it's a really great framework to kind of view the characters in as actors as well. Yeah, that was great.
Well, I happen to think the opposite is true too. So what I mean is like, for instance, modern psychology informed our reading of Shakespeare, but I actually think Shakespeare informs our understanding of modern psychology. He's the person who is, from a narrative and sort of common understanding perspective, inventing the human. That's he's creating the things that we understand what the human experience is, so that when you go back, I mean, and it's not just Shakespeare, it's lots of dramatists. I mean,
yeah,
Freud had lots of things to say about Oedipus, and that's a play. So I just think I think that's part of it too. It's like, this is a whole other podcast, but and it's sort of a side note. So I'm sort of, I don't even know if I want to share it, but I taught a class on criminal justice and Shakespeare a few years ago, and part of what came out of with Michael DeValve, if you're listening, Michael, hello. But part of what came out of that was the thinking that it wasn't just, you can now take this Shakespeare text and this issue and lay them over the top of each other, but actually people reading plays for 400 years has informed what our sort of notion of what justice is. So that actually there was some inventing of that going back then, and it's become so influential that it's seeped its way into everything. So, for what that's worth.
Deep.
All right, tomorrow's 8.
It's not tomorrow. It's not tomorrow.
Monday. You know what I mean.
Well, I know what you mean, but I don't think our listeners do.
We're back Monday.
On 8.
Claire wants to make sure and for certain you understand it's Monday.
I mean, you can tune in tomorrow. You'll just be disappointed.
If you're listening to this on a podcast, it could be any day.
Yeah, that's true. We've been doing a bad job of injecting, the longevity into these. I keep forgetting that these are going to be podcast episodes at some point.
There's a chance I'm an 8. And so it could be very interesting. Claire's certainty versus my uncertainty day. And we'll bring them together on the Monday. And it could be the cage match to end all cage matches.
It's very true.
I'm not seeing it.
Dick Jeremy's an 8. Yeah, I don't see it either.
Jake French thinks I'm an 8.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, come at me, Jake.
We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Lots to learn. Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Yeah.
or whatever
7
time period that you're
weeks.
having when you're listening to this on a podcast.
Bye, friends.
You've been listening to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours. Our podcast was produced by Claire Martin and Jeremy Feebig. Ashanti Bennett is our general manager. Our theme song was written by Owen Eddy. This podcast was made possible by our friends at the Arts Council of Fayetteville and Cumberland County and our fabulous monthly sustainers at patreon.com/sweetteashakes. You can join us there for an exclusive weekly podcast and loads of other fun perks. If you've enjoyed your time with us today, subscribe to this podcast or leave us a review on whatever platform you get your podcasts from. If you want to hang out with us in a future episode, drop us a line at hours@sweetteashakespeare.com. That's HOURS@sweetteashakespeare.com. Thanks again for listening to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours. Until next time, you that way, we this way.